It's Jacob. And for 6 years, Mallory was my wife. 30 years old, she was, and for 6 years, she was my best friend. That's what hurts the most. 6 months ago, if you'd asked me, I'd have told you I was the luckiest man alive. We had a good thing going. Sunday mornings meant pancakes without fail. We even took pottery classes together once, just for laughs, and every year we'd spend hours hunched over that ridiculous Christmas village, painting the tiny details. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Our marriage wasn't some cinematic masterpiece, it was built on the small, everyday stuff. And I liked it that way. Friday nights were sacred, pizza and a movie, the same tired argument about what to watch, and then inevitably settling on something we'd seen a million times. We'd even grown old and boring together, splitting chores, making dumb jokes about the romance of folding socks side by side. I honestly thought she was happy. I was. Then things started to change. Subtly, at first, almost imperceptibly. Mallory started spending more time on her phone. Little things, nothing I initially worried about. At dinner, she'd be scrolling as I told her about my day. On the couch, she'd be messaging while we watched TV. I just figured it was the usual social media vortex, or maybe the constantly buzzing workgroup chat of hers. But then she started bringing up these ideas. Stuff she'd picked up from somewhere. Self-help books, podcasts, maybe some influencer nonsense about growth and challenging traditional structures. At first, I just nodded along. Seemed like one of those phases people go through. Remember that raw food kick she was on for like a month? Yeah, like that. One night, while we were doing the dishes, she said, "Have you ever thought about how traditional marriage might hold people back?" I shrugged. Not really. I think we're doing okay. She gave me this tight little smile and said, "Yeah, but what if we could do even better?" Didn't seem worth arguing about, so I let it slide. Maybe she'd read a blog post and was just thinking out loud. But then she brought it up again a week later while we were folding laundry. "Do you think we ever stopped growing because we're too comfortable?" she asked. I laughed a little. "Mallory, I think we've got enough growth dealing with laundry piles and growing grocery bills." She laughed too, but it felt forced. Truthfully, I didn't think much of it at the time. Mallory had always been the curious type. The kind of person who could get obsessed with a random hobby and dive in headfirst. She was the one who got us into that ridiculous Christmas village in the first place after seeing some elaborate display at a friend's house. Before I knew it, our dining room table was a miniature, brightly colored town. So, when she started getting all philosophical about marriage and relationships, I figured it was just another one of her passing interests. Then, things started to shift, and those changes were hard to ignore. It began slowly. Mallory started dressing nicer for work. At first, it was just a new blouse or a pair of shoes, but soon it was a noticeable upgrade. Makeup every day, even on Fridays when she used to keep it casual. And then the perfume, the expensive stuff she used to save for date nights, suddenly became an everyday thing. I joked about her trying to win Employee of the Month, and she just laughed it off, saying, "I just want to feel good about myself." Fair enough, right? Her work habits changed too. Mallory was never the kind of person to bring work home with her. She left her laptop at the office and didn't really care about workplace drama. Suddenly, though, she was staying late more and more often. And then she started having an affair with a coworker and dismissing my love as nothing more than routine. So I exposed them and left. Left her to deal with the fallout of something she never thought would happen. She'd tell me, "We're drowning in work," or "There's this massive deadline looming." Initially, I took her at her word. Why wouldn't I? She hadn't ever given me cause to doubt her honesty. Then there was the issue with her phone. Mallory used to leave it anywhere, the counter, the nightstand, the couch. Now it was practically grafted to her hand. She kept it face down or buried in her pocket, which was unusual enough to make me take notice. One evening, while we were relaxing in front of the TV, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Half annoyed, I glanced over and asked, "What's with the constant notifications? Is the workgroup chat blowing up or something?" "Oh, it's just..." "Yeah," she responded quickly, snatching the phone and silencing it without even looking. "Just some group chat stuff. Nothing important." Her tone was casual, but something about it felt off. The Mallory I knew didn't care about group chats or notifications. And just like that, I was bombarded with questions that I didn't want to ask but couldn't ignore. Still, I tried not to overreact. It could all be innocent, I kept telling myself. People change, go through phases. Maybe she was just under a lot of stress or needed some space to herself. I even tried to put in extra effort, planned some date nights, and brought home her favorite chocolate, but she seemed distracted, always too busy or too tired. One night, I just came out and asked, "Is something going on with you?" "What do you mean?" she said, looking genuinely surprised. "You've just seemed distant lately." Are you okay? She reached out and touched my arm. Of course, I'm fine, just tired. Work's been a lot lately. Her words were reassuring, but something in her voice didn't quite match, and the unanswered questions started piling up. Why was she being so secretive with her phone? Why the sudden fascination with challenging relationship norms? And why did it feel like she wasn't really present even when she was right there next to me? It was around then that I started noticing little inconsistencies in what she said. She'd tell me about a late meeting, but when I asked how it went, she'd hesitate for a second before answering. She mentioned a work dinner once, but later slipped up and said she'd just grabbed takeout. That was enough to set off alarm bells. I started paying closer attention, not in a crazy way, but just keeping track of her words and comparing them to her actions. That's when I realized something wasn't right. But it wasn't until this new friend of hers, Becca, came into the picture that things started to fall apart. Becca was a coworker Mallory had started spending a lot of time with, recently divorced and, according to Mallory, bursting with newfound wisdom. In my mind, Becca was more like someone who binged self-help videos on YouTube and thought she was a guru. Every time Mallory spent time with Becca, she'd come back buzzing with some new radical idea about marriage, relationships, or whatever trendy nonsense Becca was pushing that week. Becca was all about redefining marriage and embracing freedom within love, whatever that's supposed to mean. Red flags? Definitely. They were waving intensely, but Mallory was absorbing every word. One night, we were cleaning up the dishes after dinner when Mallory asked out of the blue, "Do you think couples can grow by expanding their experiences?" I paused. What kind of experiences are we talking about here? She shrugged, trying to play it cool. You know, like exploring new dynamics. Becca says it can really bring people closer. Ah, well, if Becca says so, I muttered under my breath. Mallory glared at me. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, shaking my head. It just feels like Becca's more involved in our marriage than I am these days. Mallory rolled her eyes. She's just insightful. You'd actually like her if you gave her a chance. The words hung in the air, but somehow I seriously doubted that. Becca wasn't just some talking self-help guru spouting motivational platitudes. She was, it turned out, some kind of recruiter actively building a cult of modern thinkers, and my wife, Mallory, was her prized convert, her star pupil. Every time Mallory spent time with Becca, it felt like a slightly distorted version of my wife walked back through the door, a Mallory with a looser grip on reality, on us. I remember one evening in particular, Mallory came home beaming, practically radiating this newfound enlightenment. Becca and I were talking about how love evolves, she said, plopping down beside me on the couch. Did you know some couples actually grow stronger by embracing change, not fighting it? Cool story, babe, I replied, probably a little too dismissive, my eyes glued to whatever rerun was on TV. Don't you think that's actually really interesting? She pushed, nudging my arm. Sure, I said, shrugging, keeping my attention on the screen. If by change you mean trying out that new Italian place downtown or finally booking that vacation to the coast, I'm all in. No, she corrected, a slight frown creasing her brow. I mean bigger changes, like thinking outside the box in our relationship. I muted the TV, finally giving her my full attention. Mallory, what box are we talking about escaping from now? She hesitated, like she was on the verge of saying something significant but couldn't quite find the words or maybe didn't have the guts. Nothing. Never mind. It definitely wasn't nothing, but I decided not to push it, not then. I was still clinging to this desperate hope that it was just a phase, a weird, temporary obsession that would eventually pass. But then this guy, Brian, started infiltrating our conversations. Brian was a coworker of hers, someone she'd mentioned maybe once or twice in passing, but suddenly his name was everywhere, like a persistent advertising jingle you can't shake. Brian has such an interesting perspective on relationships, she'd say, almost dreamily in the middle of dinner. Or Brian thinks society puts way too much pressure on monogamy. Apparently, Brian was like the male incarnation of Becca, only, from what I gathered, slimier and annoyingly charming, married and smooth-talking to the point of being untrustworthy. He sounded like the kind of guy who'd try to sell you a timeshare and somehow convince you that you'd actually won the lottery. Now, let me be clear, in my experience, guys like Brian exist in every single workplace and Mallory's not stupid. But the way she talked about him, it was like he wasn't just a coworker. He was some kind of relationship philosopher, a guru, the Steve Jobs of interpersonal connections. I couldn't understand why she was suddenly so enthralled by these types of people. One night, I finally decided to say something, trying to keep my tone neutral. You think Brian's wife is okay with all these enlightened perspectives of his? She frowned immediately. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, it's easy to pontificate about breaking down the supposed rules of marriage when you've got someone waiting for you at home, taking care of everything. Mallory sighed dramatically. You always jump to conclusions. You assume Brian and his wife don't have a very open and honest relationship. Do they, though? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Or is that just what Brian tells people? She didn't respond, and that silence spoke volumes. It was around this time that I started to notice Mallory was texting way more than usual. She was constantly on her phone, thumbing away at the screen like her life depended on it. When I'd casually ask who she was talking to, the answer was always the same, delivered with a little too much nonchalance. Oh, just Becca. But every now and then, her phone would buzz late at night, and when I happened to glance over, she'd instantly flip it face down like she was trying to hide something. That wasn't like her at all. Usually, she didn't care if I saw her messages, but now it was like she was guarding state secrets. One particular evening, we were trying to relax and watch some TV, and her phone buzzed for the third time in a row. I caught a glimpse of the screen before she could react and saw the name Brian flash across the display. Brian texts you after work hours now? I asked, doing my best to keep my voice casual. She looked flustered for maybe half a second, then quickly shrugged it off. It's just work stuff, you know. I definitely wasn't buying it. But what really started to get under my skin was how Mallory began regurgitating Becca and Brian's pseudo-intellectual nonsense like it was gospel. Things like, society's antiquated views on relationships are so incredibly outdated, or, marriage shouldn't be about ownership. It should be about freedom. I let her finish her little speech before cutting in, keeping my voice calm but firm. Mallory, I don't own you and I've never tried to. So what exactly is the point you're trying to make? She hesitated as if bracing herself, then dove right back in. It's not about you specifically, it's about everything. Becca says people get stuck in monotonous routines, and Brian thinks couples grow even stronger when they explore new connections. I leaned back in my chair, making direct eye contact. So, Becca and Brian, huh? Sounds like they've got all the answers. When exactly did they become the authorities on our marriage? Her laugh was short, forced, almost dismissive, but I didn't flinch. You're totally overreacting. They're just sharing ideas. No, I replied, my tone still steady, they're overstepping. What works for Becca and Brian doesn't automatically mean it works for us. I'm not particularly interested in their warped version of growth, and frankly, I don't think you really are either. You've always been better than this, Mallory. She tried to brush it off, but I could tell I'd struck a nerve. You're being so close-minded, she muttered, avoiding my gaze. Call it whatever you want, I said, leaning forward, but I know who I am and I know the kind of life we've built together. And I'm not going to let someone else's half-baked philosophy tear that apart. She didn't respond, just gave me this look like I was speaking a different language entirely. And maybe in that moment I was. Maybe she was already giving them more weight than my own words. But if Becca and Brian thought they had any say in my marriage, they were in for a rude awakening. That late-night message from Brian kept replaying in my head, though. Something felt off, and I knew I needed to get to the bottom of it. The next morning, over breakfast, I decided to test the waters. So, how's Brian been? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant as I spread butter on my toast. I saw her freeze, just for a split second. He's fine, I guess. Why do you ask? She continued. No reason, I said, shrugging, playing it cool. You used to mention him all the time. Just noticed I haven't heard about him lately. Her smile seemed strained, almost forced. Well, we don't talk that much anymore. He's just a coworker. Right, I said, nodding, but my mind was already racing, analyzing her reaction. Something felt wrong, and I wasn't about to ignore it. The answer was too quick, almost like she was trying to downplay his significance. That's when it hit me, she was definitely hiding something. I eventually reached my breaking point. The doubts, the weak excuses, the constant name-dropping of Brian, it was all too much. It was like my brain was screaming at me to stop being naive. I didn't need a feeling in my gut anymore. I needed solid, undeniable proof. One night, Mallory was in the shower and her phone was sitting right there on the bathroom counter. Usually, I wouldn't even think of touching it. I've always valued trust, but that trust had been slowly eroded bit by bit with each inconsistency. This wasn't the time for restraint. This was the time for answers. My heart hammered against my ribs as I reached for her phone. Her passcode hadn't changed. She hadn't even considered it. My hands were shaking as I opened it, but a wave of anger steadied me. I went straight to her messages, scrolling until I found what I was looking for, Brian. The moment I opened that thread, it felt like the world tilted on its axis. The messages weren't explicitly sexual, but they were close enough to be a punch in the gut. Can't stop thinking about Friday. I already miss you. You're the only one who really understands me. And then the one that sent my blood pressure through the roof. We should be more careful. Don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I'm the wrong idea? What a joke. My hands clenched so hard I thought I'd shatter the damn phone. The wrong idea? What's the right idea here, Brian? That you're just having soul-bearing conversations about spreadsheets? That her team dinner was actually a late-night crisis meeting? I wanted to explode, to kick down the shower door and shove the phone in her face. But instead, I took screenshots, every single incriminating message, and sent them all to myself. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. I wanted these receipts burned into my memory. When I put the phone back exactly where I found it, my hands were still shaking. I was consumed by rage. I couldn't believe her audacity. The lies, the manipulation, the smug little texts they thought were so clever. It all made me physically sick. The next few days were pure torture. Every time Mallory opened her mouth, I wanted to lash out. Every time her smile landed on me, a surge of fury threatened to erupt. How dare she act so casually? Still, I tamped it down. This had to be handled with precision, not for her benefit but entirely for mine. She wouldn't get the satisfaction of seeing me lose control, of thinking she held all the cards. Later, at dinner, I carefully steered the conversation. Simple questions designed to gauge her comfort with deception. So, I started, keeping my tone light. When's the next team dinner happening? Her eyes flickered nervously to the side. She couldn't even maintain eye contact. Oh, probably not for a while, she mumbled. Too bad, I replied, plastering on a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. I thought you enjoyed those. They're fine, she said quickly, too quickly, cutting me off as she veered the topic towards some drivel about the weather. Pathetic. The way she squirmed, even under the most basic inquiries, was incredibly telling. Her evasiveness only strengthened my resolve to get to the truth, whatever it may be. Each time the image of those messages resurfaced in my mind, it reignited a fresh wave of anger. How long had this been going on behind my back? Was it just flirting, or had it escalated to something more? The questions mounted, but one thing was crystal clear: Mallory wasn't the woman I thought I knew. And Brian? He'd made a grave error in thinking he could get away with this. He would pay for it one way or another. I'd made up my mind. I was going to confront her. This charade had gone on long enough. All evening, I ran through various scenarios in my head, her falling apart and confessing everything, or her digging in her heels and denying it all. Honestly, I wasn't even sure what I wanted from the confrontation: answers, maybe, or simply the vindication of seeing her squirm. Either way, I was done playing oblivious. But before I could even open my mouth, Mallory entered the living room with that overly serious expression she wears when she's about to drop some profound idea on me. She sat down across from me, clasping her hands together like she was presenting a billion-dollar business plan. Can we talk? She asked. It threw me for a loop. She looked like she had news of her own. I held my tongue, deciding to let her speak first before unleashing my carefully planned interrogation. Yeah, what's up? She hesitated, her eyes darting down to the coffee table before finally meeting mine. I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about our marriage. All right, now she had my undivided attention. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Go on. Well, she started, carefully choosing her words, I feel like maybe we've gotten a little stuck. Like we're just going through the motions instead of actively growing together. Stuck? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. What exactly do you mean by stuck? She bit her lip, clearly searching for the right euphemism. I just think there are ways we can strengthen our connection, you know? Try something different, something that could make us stronger in the long run. I stared at her, my mind racing. This wasn't about us at all. This was about her, Brian, and whatever absurd narrative they'd concocted. You think we need to try something different to strengthen our marriage? I asked, keeping my voice deliberately neutral. She nodded earnestly, as if she genuinely believed the words coming out of her mouth. I really think it could be good for us. It might sound unconventional, but I truly believe it could bring us closer. Unconventional? How so? I pressed, trying to force her to expose her true intentions. She hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to her hands. Well, I was thinking that maybe I could go on a few dates just to see what else is out there. Like, explore connections outside of us. Nothing serious, of course, just something to help us grow as individuals. For a moment, I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. A few dates? Was she out of her mind? I blinked, waiting for her to laugh, backtrack, or admit it was some kind of sick joke. But no, she just sat there, looking at me with this sincere, hopeful expression, as if she'd just suggested a new brand of coffee. I could feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Instead of exploding, I took a deep breath and managed a weak smile. You know what, Mallory? Fine. Let's try your bright idea. If you really think this experiment is the key to fixing us, then be my guest. Knock yourself out. Her face lit up like I just announced we'd won the lottery. Really? You mean it? Absolutely, I said, making a show of nodding. Whatever helps you, I'm all for it. I trust your judgment. The sheer ridiculousness of the situation was almost comical. She honestly believed I was buying into her fantasy, but the truth was my mind was already miles ahead, plotting my countermove. While she was off on her little explorations over the next few days, I started digging into Brian. I went through his online presence, contacted people who knew him, anything I could find. I'd already seen enough to know he wasn't some harmless coworker, but the more I learned, the uglier it got. Turns out Brian had a reputation. This wasn't his first rodeo. He had a pattern of targeting women at the office, showering them with attention, making them feel special, manipulating them into thinking he cared, and then discarding them when the situation got too complicated. Mallory wasn't unique to him. She was just another notch on his belt, another target he'd easily charmed. I needed solid proof, and I reached out to Ashley, one of Mallory's co-workers. Mallory had always seemed strangely jealous of Ashley. I suspected it was because Ashley was sharp, confident, and didn't put up with any nonsense. We'd crossed paths at a couple of company events, and I remembered her as incredibly direct and insightful. I sent Ashley a brief message, carefully avoiding specifics and hinting at the situation. Her response was almost immediate, and she didn't mince words. Brian's a predator. He's been doing this to women here for years. He makes them feel like they're the only ones who understand him and then moves on when he gets bored or things get difficult. Everyone sees through him except the ones he's actively manipulating. She even mentioned one woman who had quit the company altogether after Brian's actions had turned her life upside down. Looking back at Mallory's texts with Brian, the pieces started falling into place. His lines about feeling understood, about finding a deeper connection, they weren't original. It was a carefully crafted script he used to ensnare vulnerable women. The more I uncovered, the angrier I felt. This wasn't just about Mallory's betrayal anymore. Brian had preyed on her, trapped her in the same manipulative cycle he had subjected so many other women to. It was infuriating that she'd placed so much trust in him and trashed everything we'd built together over the years. That's when I realized that a simple confrontation with Mallory wouldn't cut it. I had to shatter her entire illusion. My first move was to have the divorce papers drawn up. I was convinced there was no turning back from this, not after everything I'd discovered. She actually thought she could drag me through her warped version of modern love. Then I asked Ashley for a huge favor. Would you be willing to help me expose him? I asked, laying out my plan. Ashley didn't hesitate. Absolutely. He's long overdue for a reality check. With her help, I started putting the pieces into place. Mallory wasn't just going to hear about Brian's true nature. She was going to witness it firsthand. That Friday, everything was ready. Mallory had mentioned earlier in the week that she'd be working late. I knew exactly what that meant, but I played along, acting like the clueless fool she clearly thought I was. I'd even wished her luck with her big project, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She didn't even bother asking about my plans, assuming I'd be sitting around, oblivious, while she and Brian carried out whatever they had planned. When Mallory walked in, earlier than I expected, she was greeted by the sight of me and Ashley sitting comfortably on the couch. Ashley looked stunning. Ashley's presence was undeniable. Her black dress, simple yet elegant, combined with her confident stance made her a magnetic force. She sat with her legs crossed, a glass of wine in hand, radiating an assuredness that suggested she didn't fear anyone, especially not Mallory. I saw Mallory freeze in the doorway, keys clutched halfway to the counter. A whirlwind of emotions crossed her face, confusion, then panic, finally settling into a fiery rage. Her eyes were fixed on Ashley and me as if she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. "Hey," I said, trying for a casual tone as I stood up, forcing a smile. "You're home early." "What? What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling as her gaze darted between Ashley and me. "Oh, nothing much," I replied, gesturing towards Ashley with what I hoped looked like a relaxed hand. "Just a little date night. You remember Ashley, right? From your office." Ashley turned, offering Mallory a polite, but distinctly sharp, smile. "Hi, Mallory. Nice to see you again," she said, her voice perfectly smooth, almost laced with mockery. "Dead serious," I answered, my tone deliberately cold, unwavering. "You've been so interested in exploring new avenues. I figured I'd take a page out of your book." Her face flushed a deep red. You're on a date in our house? While we're still married?" Ashley tilted her head, her smirk widening. "He's been an absolute gentleman all evening. Honestly, Mallory, I don't know how you let him slip away." Shut up, Mallory snapped at Ashley, then her eyes locked onto mine, burning with anger. What the hell is this? Are you trying to humiliate me? No, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a shard of ice. You've done a pretty good job of that yourself. Or did you think I wouldn't notice your working late lies, your pathetic excuses, or your little side project with Brian that was supposed to strengthen our marriage? The mention of Brian's name hit its mark. Her composure visibly crumbled. It's not what you think, she began, her voice desperate. Save it, I interrupted, walking over to the coffee table. I grabbed the folder containing the divorce papers and slammed it down in front of her. The sound reverberated through the room, leaving no space for misinterpretation. Here's how this is going to work, I said, my voice controlled, hard. You're going to sign these papers, pack your things, and get out of my house. You want to explore connections with Brian or whoever else? Fine. Just not under my roof. Her eyes widened and tears began to stream down her face. Jacob, no. Please, we can fix this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You didn't mean for it to go this far? I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts. You lied to me. You betrayed me. You treated me like I was an idiot while you were playing your little games, and now you want to stay? Absolutely not. Jacob, please, she begged, her voice cracking as she sobbed. It was a mistake. I'll stop. I'll cut ties with Brian. Just, please don't do this. Ashley chose that moment to stand up, her confidence unwavering as she glanced between us. Should I leave? She asked, her tone calm but with a hint of amusement. This seems like it's getting personal. No, I said, my eyes locked on Mallory, who was trembling. She can stay. After all, Mallory, you've been so eager for a new dynamic. Maybe it's my turn now. That was the final blow. Mallory let out a strangled sob, turned on her heel, and bolted up the stairs. The sound of her feet pounding on the floorboards was followed by the sharp slam of the bedroom door. I followed her upstairs, my steps slow, deliberate. By the time I reached the bedroom doorway, she was frantically throwing clothes into a suitcase, her hands shaking so violently that she struggled to zip it closed. Take whatever you need, I said, my back against the cool wood of the door frame. But be out by tomorrow. The utilities are in my name now, and you're cut off from the accounts. It's done, Mallory. Just accept it. She stood there for a beat, like she couldn't process the words coming out of my mouth. Then, hands shaking slightly, she grabbed the suitcase off the bed and brushed past me without a word. I knew Ashley was downstairs, probably smoothing out her dress. When the front door slammed, I heard her voice. Well, that was satisfying. More than you know, I muttered, dropping onto the couch. The silence the next morning was deafening. But it was a good kind of quiet. No more constant tension, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was gone, her suitcase and her ridiculous idea of strengthening our marriage with her. The silence was liberating, but the aftermath of her little storm was just starting. She didn't leave quietly, that's for sure. 3 calls that day, each voicemail more pathetic than the last. Apologies, excuses, promises. I didn't mean to. I messed up. Brian's nothing to me. Please call back. I didn't bother listening to most of them. They all sounded the same, the empty words of someone only sorry she got caught. I knew I couldn't avoid her forever, the divorce papers still needed to be filed. But I wasn't rushing anything. She made her choices and I was focusing on mine. Which brought me to Brian. As good as it felt to see Mallory go, knowing that sleazeball was still out there, preying on other women, rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't enough to just be rid of them. I needed him to understand what he'd done. So I reached out to Ashley again. She put me in touch with 2 other women from the office who'd been through the same routine with Brian. Listening to their stories was like reliving my own nightmare. Flirty texts, emotional games, empty promises that disappeared the moment things got real. One of them had even filed a complaint with HR, but Brian's charm and reputation as a nice guy had saved him. Not this time. Together, we compiled everything, the texts, emails, screenshots of inappropriate messages, statements from everyone he'd manipulated. Ashley delivered the evidence to HR, and within days, Brian was the main topic of conversation in the office. The investigation moved fast, and by the end of the month, he was gone. Fired, disgraced, and, as I later heard, dealing with an extremely unhappy wife of his own. As for Mallory, my silence didn't sit well with her. After a week of ignored calls, she showed up at the house unannounced. The knock on the door told me everything I needed to know. It was her. Ashley had told me she'd heard through the grapevine that Brian had dumped Mallory after the scandal, so I figured it was only a matter of time before she came crawling back. I opened the door and there she was. Puffy-eyed, looking like she hadn't slept in days, clutching a folder. Jacob, please, she said, her voice cracking. Can we just talk? There's nothing to talk about, I said, keeping my voice flat. You made your choice and I made mine. Brian lied to me, she blurted out. He said this was normal, that it would bring us closer. He was just using me. I leaned against the door frame. And you bought it. You listened to him instead of me. And now you want me to feel bad for you. Her eyes welled up again and she shook her head. I was an idiot. I didn't see what I was doing. Please, Jacob, I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I sighed, stepping back slightly. Mallory, it's not about fixing it anymore. It's about accountability. You wanted freedom, you got it. Now you have to live with it. Then she hit me with the oldest trick in the book. But I love you, she whispered, her voice barely audible, wavering like a dying flame. I just shook my head, the movement tight, mechanical. No, I said, the word heavy in the silence. You're in love with a version of me that exists only in your head. You couldn't even respect me enough to be honest. Trust is the bedrock. Without it, love is just an empty word, a hollow promise. And we're out of trust. We've been out for a while. Her shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. It was then, I think, the weight of it all finally hit her, the sheer impossibility of repairing the damage she'd done. I understand, she managed, the words a soft, defeated exhale. She pushed the folder into my hands, the signed divorce papers, the official end, and then she turned and walked away. After Mallory was finally, irrevocably gone from my life, a strange calm settled over me. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever, a sense of peace. It wasn't just the relief of being free from her lies, from the constant suspicion that had become my new normal. It was something deeper, a quiet certainty that I finally understood my own worth, what I was entitled to. Ashley and I kept talking. She'd been there for me through the worst of it, a constant voice of reason. She was quick to point out, maybe a little too gleefully, that I dodged a serious bullet with Mallory. And while we weren't exactly dating, there was definitely something between us, an unspoken understanding. Maybe it would evolve into something more down the line. Maybe it wouldn't. I wasn't pushing it. But it was good, damn good, to have someone in my life who actually respected me, who valued my honesty and treated me as an equal. I heard through mutual friends, the inevitable grapevine, that Mallory had moved back in with her parents. I won't pretend there wasn't a small, dark part of me that felt a twinge of satisfaction knowing she was getting a taste of the humiliation she'd so casually inflicted on me. But honestly, at the end of the day, she wasn't really on my radar anymore. She was the past, a closed chapter, and I had absolutely no desire to revisit it. I finally had my life back, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine to build, mine to screw up, mine to enjoy.